So in case you haven't heard, Battlefield had what EA have called the biggest launch in its franchise's history. And yet, the Battlefield teams just got hit with a round of layoffs. That's not exactly the victory lap you might expect after a massive success. Normally, we expect to hear about layoffs after a game flops. Sales bomb, investors panic, executives start sweating, and suddenly a bunch of developers are being realigned. But Battlefield didn't flop. Reports suggest that the new Battlefield sold around 20 million copies within a few months of launch, which by pretty much any metric I can think of is a massive success. Without even knowing the exact investment cost, I can't imagine this game didn't recoup its investment, and we're not even counting like battle passes and cosmetic sales in addition to that. So if the game sold so well, why are a whole bunch of its developers losing their jobs? Well, I think there's a few layers to this answer and some unfortunate truths about the game industry. Let's get into, well, what actually happened first. EA recently laid off developers across multiple studios working on Battlefield. This includes people from DICE, Criterion, Ripple Effect, and Motive. Now, we don't have the exact numbers on the layoffs, but I think they're fairly substantial. And the cuts appear to have hit several teams connected directly with Battlefield's development and support. And of course, EA released a statement along with these layoffs saying that we've made several select changes within our Battlefield organization to better align, I love that word, our teams around what matters most to our community. Battlefield remains one of the biggest priorities, and we're continuing to invest in the franchise, guided by player feedback and insights from Battlefield Labs. So, reading between the lines, basically, don't worry, everything's fine, except for the people who just lost their jobs. Now, to be clear, Battlefield isn't going anywhere, this isn't a studio closure, but we don't really know how big the layoffs are. But we do still have to deal with the ridiculous headline of Battlefield downsizing their team after a major success. And I think this reflects on some bigger trends and problems that are industry-wide, not just on Battlefield's team, because obviously they're a huge success and yet they're still laying off people. This is, I think, happening across the industry. And there's a bunch of reasons why. One of them is that AAA is massively shifting toward live service titles. That's where they see their future. They're going to let indie devs have their crazy big launch successes, but AAA is going to have their forever games that generate tons of live service money. So the launch sales metrics are no longer the most important metric to them anymore. Back in the day, when you launched Battlefield in 1942, big success, roll the credits, start making sequels and DLC, it was arguably a much simpler time for these big studios. But today, publishers care a lot more about player retention. How many people are going to stay in the game so that they can keep buying skins and buying battle passes? They're trying to keep you inside an ecosystem for years. And if players stop playing your game shortly after release, well, the long-term revenue potential drops dramatically. And when revenue potential drops, most big studios will do the simple equation. Does it cost more to fix the game and try and get players back in to improve their tail-end sales, or do they just work on a new game? Usually, the math points towards making a new game, even if it can ultimately hurt that studio's reputation in the long run. And then what we tend to see when a live service game reduces its post-launch support is players get less content, players get more bored, they stop playing at an even quicker rate, and it just becomes a cyclical thing in which the live service game fails even faster. Now, the other side of this equation is just how crazy big AAA development has become. Battlefield isn't just made by DICE anymore. It's a multi-studio production pipeline. DICE works on the core Battlefield systems, Criterion supports the gameplay and multiplayer, Ripple Effect handles additional modes and live service content, Motive contributes to technology and development support, Ridgeline Games, RIP, was working on some of the single player. That's a lot of developers working on a single project. EA has already stated multiple times that it's been the biggest Battlefield endeavor in history. But here's the unfortunate catch, and this does apply to small studios as well. You usually only need a massive production team during full production of a game. Once the game ships, the studio usually doesn't need hundreds of developers to continue working on it. As an example, if you have a code team of 50 people that are building the core tech for the game, like all the mechanics with how shooting works and multiplayer code works, and you get that all dialed in and it's working, and then you ship the game, well, you don't need to build any more of those systems. So what do you do with this highly paid, highly skilled team at that point. And that's why it is not even uncommon in this industry to hear about layoffs even after successful launches. This has been happening for as long as I can remember, even well before live service titles were a thing. Teams would get hired, games would launch, the team is fired. Hopefully to be rehired later, but this is such a difficult industry. It's like making a movie. You hire actors and a crew and then launch the movie, and everyone knows that working on the project, once shooting wraps, they gotta go get a new job. And while that's not always the case in the game industry, it sadly is more often than I think we all want it to be. Now, of course, there's another compounding factor here, and that is AI layoffs. Across all industries, from gaming to accounting, AI is hitting teams massively. Teams are replacing workers in mass with AI tools. This has particularly hit coders the hardest, with Claude Code being brought in to multiply the speed of a single programmer. They all of a sudden find themselves with a surplus of programmers. Guess what happens to those people? They get laid off. And I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of this just happened with the EA teams as well. This technology is progressing so quickly that from month to month, new tools come out that could completely invalidate somebody's job. Now, personally, I wish there was just a great way to fix this honestly really stupid layoff cycle that we see with games, even when those games are a success. I think a lot of the big studios like EA could absolutely plan better for product launches and have alternative projects that could absorb the employee crossover. I know many studios do try and do this, but it's rarely a one-to-one translation. So people get cut from one team and the other team can't absorb all of them, so they get a lot of layoffs. But I do think the AAA industry has gotten wildly comfortable with the layoff cycle becoming kind of a common step in the production and release process. Like, it's pretty much expected in the game industry. When I worked at EA, I would see entire QA teams get laid off and then rehired once they needed QA once again. And working there, you sort of got used to it. You went, oh, that's alarming, but also, I guess, the cycle of how things work. It's just kind of a wild industry. Fortunately, I think medium-sized studios are better prepared and budgeted around these types of things, and they have better outlets for employees who might not be needed on one project to help out in different ways. We're certainly seeing bigger success stories come from those medium-sized studios these days. Perhaps we're going to see some of the game industry stability shift over into the AA studios more so than the AAA studios. More manageable sized teams, less drastic layoff cycles. I do think that the size and damage of these layoff cycles could absolutely be mitigated with better planning and better management. One thing for certain though, it is absolutely ridiculous to see headlines that Battlefield 6 is the best-selling Battlefield game and the best-selling game of 2025, and then they lay off people months later. That kind of situation is absolutely ridiculous. We are absolutely heading into unprecedented times with so much tech change and industry change right now. I wish all game devs the best of luck. It's a really hard industry to be a part of. I hope the people that did get laid off from Battlefield Studios have some luck finding new jobs. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this whole situation. Do you think there's some other factors that I might have overlooked here? Do you have any ideas on how EA could better plan to not have to do so many layoffs after a massive success? Let me know in the comments. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And up next, check out this video on my top 10 single-player FPS games. It is a difficult task to make a good single-player FPS, but there are some absolute gems out there. Check it out. As always, I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.